Allow me to introduce today's speaker, Alison Brooks, one of the UK's most highly awarded and internationally acclaimed architects. Raised in Guelph, Ontario, she studied architecture at the University of Waterloo before moving to London in 1989. Since founding her practice in 1996, she has emerged as one of the UK's most inventive architects, with works ranging from private houses and installations to education and arts buildings, master plans, and landmark towers. As we'll see in her presentation, Alison's unique architectural approach springs from her invested research into specific geographies, climate, and cultures of each project, so that her design solutions emerge as both unique and relevant to the constituencies that they serve. Without further ado, I am absolutely thrilled to welcome Alison to the FutureFest stage.
Thanks, Hannah. It's really great to be here, and thanks for the invitation. So I'm going to talk about crafting community and civic spaces, as Hannah described, but I'm going to kind of broaden this question of what is community and what is civic to the question of what is kindred, maybe thinking about those words in a different way. And I really like the term kindred spirit, and the definition is a person who has the same opinions, feelings, or interests as you. But I think actually there can be an architecture of kindred spirits, architecture with the same sensibilities, effects, and qualities as its ancestors. And I think it's important to also talk about ancestors when we talk about the future. And it's also important to talk about what we mean by community, and does community always mean people, or can community also mean nature? And I like to start my talks also with this map of Canada on the left, which is a geological map of Canada, where I'm from. And I love the map because it sort of expresses territory as types of earth and rock rather than political boundaries. And also the image on the right is an island in Ontario where I go back every summer of my life to a place in the Canadian wilderness that's made of the rock and the geology, the Canadian Shield, 4 billion years old. And it really connects me to time and nature, and in a way is a source of inspiration in terms of how nature can, and trees in particular, can sort of emerge from rock and have this incredible resilience, give us all these incredible gifts that trees give us. And somehow it's a place of the essential, the absolute minimum of earth and soil, and yet a kind of maximum gift of oxygen, water vapor, habitats. They're incredible. So anyway, how can we make architecture more like nature? I talk about trees a lot in my work, and in particular the sort of hardwood forests of the eastern North America. And I've used wood in many of my projects, including the Smile, which is made of tulip wood, again from sort of the Allegheny Forest, Pennsylvania. And this sort of incredible synthesis of structure, form, space, and material that you can achieve using materials like wood. So, and then this is also a kind of harking back to my youth, growing up in Southern Ontario, and where I was very much influenced by my mother, who used to always take me to see the historic buildings, just to admire the character and quality of the really beautiful Romanesque, neo-Romanesque buildings in Toronto. But then at the same time, the great optimistic modernist buildings, cultural buildings that were built in the 60s. And so I think in a way I've always had this idea that there must be some way of synthesizing this historic, the beauty and craft of historic architecture, but also the optimistic futurism of modernism. And I also have been deeply influenced by traveling in Europe. These are images from my fourth year traveling in Rome, fourth year architecture school where we studied in Rome, traveled around Europe, and how this kind of incredible permanence, plasticity, and sculptural qualities of brick and concrete makes you really think about what architecture is made of and how we can somehow work in a way that creates permanence and mystery, but also sustainable structures that last literally thousands of years. Anyway, fast forward here, I moved to London in 1989, and I kind of created the North American context for London. And one of the things that attracted me to London is the sort of incredible urban form, the beautiful fabric of terraced houses, the garden squares that were catalysts for development, interesting, like nature captured within an urban form, but how these buildings and typologies have adapted over time to become many other things, universities like the AA, hotels, office buildings. It's sort of like infrastructure, and housing it as infrastructure has been one of my main interests. In 2017, I celebrated 20 years of ABA at Somerset House with a big party. That's not my party on the left, but it's something like what we're going to have in another few years. But it was an opportunity to have an exhibition and sort of state the 4 ideals behind my work: authenticity, generosity, civicness, and beauty. And how I've tried, and my practice, my colleagues try very hard to bring these 4 ideals to all of our projects, no matter the scale or the type. At the same time, I've kind of, obviously you develop as a practice as an architect, and there's a more comprehensive goal of sustainability that we're all engaged in. And in a way, this kind of circle of sustainability for me is about bringing together those ideals with memory, with context, and with instinct. And all of these together are the kind of source of how we work. And responding to context, as Hannah said earlier, is something that is, and research around those contexts means that every project we do is quite different. Each one is responding to a specific place and context and culture, and is an opportunity to explore new material languages. So this array of projects, I hope, demonstrates that. So, is there an architecture of kindred spirits? Back to the beginning. And I'll start with a project. Well, an idea, part of this idea is about reimagining archetypes, and archetypes being sort of ancestors. And this is a very extreme example, but in Toronto, we won a collaborative master plan for Quayside on Toronto's waterfront. And here there's incredible density. In Toronto, you have to build at scale to support the kind of social infrastructure that comes with any waterfront or inner city development. And so this project is really about making super tall buildings act as hosts for nature, and expressing the cladding as a kind of bark, as a sort of rough and textured surface that would enable birds and pollinators and bees to use the tower as a stepping stone and create opportunities for every resident to grow plants and climbers, and sort of use that skin, that in-between space, as a sheltered place, and also for sun shading. So it's trying to bring ecology into the expression of the tower in a really overt way. And on the right, the bottom 5 stories of the building are designed as a college, community college. And above that, the tower is doing the sort of hard work of really helping finance the whole kind of social and cultural infrastructure of the development, and a community forest, which is the kind of connecting tissue between the wider development. And the other idea, this kind of softened form of a curve, it's It's called the Western Curve, that sweeps up to become the tower with a kind of arcaded base. And this is about, in a way, bringing a sort of civic grandeur and softness to the public realm. I really believe you have to, if you're building very tall, you have to give back twice as much to the city and the street. And so this is a kind of softening of the route from the kind of overpass type context to the restored water's edge. The next project is at a completely different scale, completely different context, which is, it's also an archetype, and it's a college, university building for Exeter College in Oxford. And as some of you, or most of you may know, that the collegiate model originates with monasteries, the kind of monastic tradition of sort of cloistered community around a church that basically studied together, lived together, learned together, and kind of was a self-sufficient community that served the community through charitable service. And this idea of the cloistered collegiate community has evolved into the university model of today, and is expressed in particular in Oxford and Cambridge, where the quads, the sort of four-sided quads, are the kind of basis of an academic community. So we won a competition in 2011 to reimagine the collegiate quad for Exeter College in Oxford, and this is it on the left with the outline in turquoise. So they had a site in the center of Oxford that's completely constrained in terms of land, and on the right you can see the beautiful quads, neo-Gothic chapel, but they needed to expand, and so they bought a site and the brief for this project was to reinvent the collegiate ideal for the 21st century. So how can this kind of monastic model evolve, and the architecture express that? And the site also had an existing building, so part of our challenge was to retain some of the identity of the existing 1913 building, which is named after John Ruskin, and to sort of reimagine how this site might actually be transformed to support the community, new generation of students of Exeter College. Sort of blue sky, this long and narrow site to create this place, 90 student rooms and lots of academic teaching space. And this diagram on the right is where we arrived to sort of manipulate, in a way, the traditional C-shaped quad or rectangular quad into an S-shaped quad. And this gave us this kind of place of opportunity where the one courtyard faces south, the other faces north, the local neighborhood, and then a kind of interesting crux of the building. And this is where we decided to introduce a new element to the brief, which was the learning commons at the center of the building. So the S shape kind of evolved into a place connected by cloisters. The front door is here. There's a journey past teaching spaces to the learning commons, through another cloister to the auditorium. We also thought of it as a three-dimensional landscape. There are 4 split levels in the learning commons, and then also as a sort of ambulatory that's continuous, so that the building itself becomes a journey. And so sort of articulating that journey architecturally was an opportunity to explore another archetype, the cloister, and to reimagine it as a place of light rather than darkness. And so the timber cloister of the South Quad creates a space of a convex ellipse, and in between each sort of frame, it's glazed, and then there's a north cloister made of concrete, and that's a concave ellipse. And these lead to a timber auditorium, a sort of destination. So the ground floor was conceived as both a journey and a series of destinations for students and academics and fellows enclosed teaching spaces and open social learning spaces. And then another key idea was sort of enveloping the student community, the student rooms on the upper stories with this curved skin, which was conceived as a single plane of metal that's cut and folded and wraps the student accommodation like a kind of cloak. So it's a sort of softened articulation of the roof. And this allowed us to extend the building up another sort of 2-3 stories from where it was. And you can see this kind of, it's actually a sort of 7-story building disguised as a 3-story building. And then here's the sort of S-shaped quad, which becomes a sort of landscape of journeys. And there's also an amphitheater in the south quad. So yeah, and these two sections show how the scale of the building changes and steps down towards the auditorium, where it becomes a single-story pavilion in a courtyard. So this is the kind of general configuration, but I can explain it better probably in 3 dimensions. So this is the lower ground floor that has the lowest level of the learning commons. Restaurant, kitchen, IT, an archive, a full sort of high security archive for special collections. And then the floor above is the ground floor with learning commons and the amphitheater and all the teaching spaces in red and the auditorium in green. And then the floor above, it's student rooms with commons, sort of kitchen for every floor, called a family kitchen, and then another floor of student rooms and another floor of student rooms with teaching spaces up under the roof, and then the top floor with sort of tutors and residents and a roof terrace. So it's a really complex packing of program on a very tight site. And this was the kind of final iteration of the massing and the cladding, which is actually stainless steel shingles in a checkerboard pattern. And this pattern was inspired by the chapel, Exeter College's historic chapel, that has this diamond pattern of leadwork on the spire. So it was a way of bringing new identity and also merging roof with walls in a way that sort of expresses a new relationship between students and the college, and a more open relationship between different communities. And this project took a lot of time to get through planning. You can see here about 3 years of planning. We had to write a couple of books to explain how our design for the roof adhered to the evolution of roofs in Oxford's from the 11th century to the present day. This kind of academic challenge is quite common in places like Oxford and Cambridge, but worthwhile because they care about everything having meaning, having kind of lineage, and in a way ancestors. They want to understand how any architectural idea has a relationship that is relevant to the place. Here are the roof tiles being made in Enfield, in northeast London, which is quite nice. There's still some things. The project under construction, so it's hybrid in situ concrete. Shoot.
Hi, everyone. Hannah jumping in. While Alison, she's actually just having a bit of internet issues. But while we're waiting, I'll just say thank you all so much for joining us. It's really exciting to be here celebrating the A+ Awards. Alison Brooks Architects won the Best Medium Firm this year. and we've long loved and admired their work. So it's really exciting to get to see this. If Alison's back, I'll continue after, but there we go. Yes.
Sorry about that. There we go. I'm back. Okay. Yeah, hybrid structure. The roof is a celebration of crafts. The happy roofer coming in, doing this stainless steel tiles. And then this is the journey through the building. So the entrance foyer that provides a kind of resting place, a view into the courtyard, and then the cloister that invites visitors to enter the quad. The material palette is very simple: stone, bath stone, American black cherry, and brass and concrete. And that's pretty much it for the whole building. And we integrated signage and handrails and everything into that palette. And then this is how the cloister appears from the exterior and the amphitheater, but on the inside, tunnel of wood. Sorry, the really bad here. And I think the rainstorm is making the connection cut out. So the light changes quality constantly. It's a dappled light, it's dynamic and moving. And here, hopefully there will be a little video that shows how that space transitions from being opaque. It's part of this journey. Okay, and here's the learning commons. So this is the kind of crux of the building where students can gather, study alone, in groups, in enclosed spaces or open spaces. It connects to the neighborhood, to the sort of Jericho beyond. This is looking to the south. So it is this kind of bridge, sort of east-west, north-south spatial bridge in the building. And then on the lower level, there's a cafe, sort of triple height cafe, also a study space. It's used for parties, conferences, dances, you name it. It's super multifunctional. And then transparency is a big thing in the building, making sure that people can study, students can study in any space in the building and be visually connected but acoustically separated. And then this is the north cloister, the concrete cloister that leads to the auditorium foyer with a William Morris rug. William Morris was an alumnus of Exeter College. And then the auditorium itself, which is actually a multi-purpose space. It's for dining, events, yoga, performances, everything possible. And the roof has a section that sort of flips up to pull light from the south into the space of the auditorium, because it's on the north side of the building, to kind of dynamic atmosphere into that space. Also, glulam, column-free space. It's a kind of wishbone structure that is self-supporting, and because we're literally maximizing every inch of space in this site. So yeah, every corridor is a place to dwell with benches or study spaces. This is the archive study room, special collections with the roof light into the north quad. And then the staircases are also part of the journey, providing views into other parts of the building. Corridors, one rule I have is never a dead end in a corridor. You should always be able to see the outside and always be able to see into staircases. And this is also true of the family kitchens that are also shared study spaces, very visible from the corridor, but also this idea of double transparency. You can see through a space out to nature, out to the courtyards beyond. And then the student rooms, some of them are under the roof, the curved roof. So quite a few students have very nice curved ceilings in their rooms, and sort of letterbox windows to illuminate their desks. Another rule I have is you should never have to turn a light on in a room if it's the daytime. There should be enough natural light for it to be completely illuminated. And here, that space up under the curved roof is for the fellows' research offices and study spaces. So this is where students have their tutorials. And I thought, by putting these spaces up in the treetops, really beautiful lofty spaces, that would attract students to come to their tutorials and not skip them. So it's a kind of idea of making a place of desire up in the roof of the building. That's where your tutors are waiting, and your colleagues, so you can learn together in the treetops. So this is a sort of common space up under the roof, and a terrace that's carved out of the roof. And this is the completed building. So this building has actually changed the way people relate to each other within the college. Traditionally, different groups sort of got together in rooms, cellular rooms, and those rooms are all sort of enclosed in this sequestered quad format, and the S-shaped quad and the kind of loosening of the boundaries between spaces and circulation has really brought students together, students with tutors, with rectors, and very senior people. They all mix together in the learning commons and common spaces, and it's really reinforced that sense of connectedness. It's also about combating loneliness and isolation, because in these high-intensity university students often really suffer from isolation. So the idea of this building was to really give choices to students to be social, to be seen, or to be more secluded and private. Okay, I have another, and this is how it sits in the context of Oxford. So then I have time for another project. I have 15 more minutes, is that right? Okay. Okay.
Yes, so, you have 15 more minutes, so you're good.
This one is, I've described as welcoming gravity. And this is a housing project, recently finished in King's Cross. And, you might say, well, how is this about creating community and being civic? I believe all housing is civic building. And I think that having a sense of local identity and a sense of place is really intrinsic to feeling a sense of belonging and feeling part of a community or a neighborhood. It's all together. It's all one thing. So I was fortunate enough to be invited into a competition in 2016 to design one of the final pieces in the puzzle, which is King's Cross in London. So you can see on the left, the kind of red courtyard building at the top of the site. That was the competition site. And on the right, St. Pancras Station on the left and Cross on the right. And then a huge master plan mixed use with a huge variety of buildings by many different architects. They're all subject to competition. So it's a sort of great collection of contemporary architecture, but woven together with historic buildings that were the coal drops yard, the granary store, the canal buildings, the historic railway infrastructure of King's Cross. And now it's become this kind of fantastic mixed neighborhood, and this sort of blank space in the center picture is the kind of final site that needed a building. So I always look to the past when I start thinking about the future. All creativity is, its source is memory. So I really believe in memory, not just architectural memory, but cultural memory, social memory, as a source of inspiration. So St. Pancras Station on the left, amazing neo-Gothic masterpiece, and right next door to it is King's Cross Station on the right. Obviously, the identity of these buildings is very much about architectural language and material, but also the kind of legacy that they are built on. And in a way, I was also thinking about things like the Forum of Trajan on the left and Place des Vosges on the right, one of the most incredible places, housing projects, residential projects, I think, in Europe. And how could I bring all of these kind of memories and influences into a new language? And this project is also part of a master plan. So the diagrams on the bottom are, on the left, this sort of massing envelope, which is the limit of the master plan developable area. And then a series of kind of iterations carving away at that maximum envelope to achieve kind of really good proportions and courtyards and towers, a sort of carved expression of a perimeter block, but that perimeter block becomes a sort of tower. And then on the top, a kind of playful sketch of celebration of arches that were really sort of the key to finding a new language for this project. So as I said, it's a courtyard building that becomes towers, and it's also mixed tenure, it's private sale apartments, as well as affordable housing in green. On the right, in the UK, every project has to be at least 40% affordable housing within the private development. It's also, it has a kind of cloister and courtyard at its center. And this was a kind of conceptual diagram expressing the idea of creating a sort of urban tableau, sort of animated silhouette of the project that is punctuated by arches that signify, that create particular moments of surprise, but also create this kind of generous base. Sorry. So here are the competition renders that sort of show that intention in terms of opening up the base and sort of signifying dwelling, but also something civic in terms of the scale. Here's our kind of competition model. We're holding it up so that it's in the spot where it's been built, actually in that gap between those two towers, which is kind of funny. And then here are some of the tests we did trying to find a new language for the base, for arches. How do you sort of reimagine a Gothic or Edwardian arch into something contemporary that creates that character? And we also built a sort of one-to-one mock-up of our arch, which is a Bezier arch, as part of our Venice Biennale installation in 2018. So here we made our arch out of light, you know, the gaps between the plywood. So it's mostly light and not much material, but the Bezier geometry is what we're trying to kind of explore. Here are some of our technical drawings. I think we had 18 different sizes of arch. We modeled every brick in the building in Revit, wrote scripts to make sure everything, all the arrays were perfect. We also exhibited it at the Venice Biennale in 2021, part of our sort of Campo Marzio of housing projects, showing how they support civic spaces and yeah, a kind of community and neighborhood life. I'm not going to talk through these plans, but you can see they're quite efficient plans. Everything has to conform to London Housing Design Guides in terms of minimum area. And so it's working hard. Again, sorry, this is a repeat of our competition renders. But as you move around the building, it changes because of the form, the kind of carving. The base starts to peel away from the top. The entrance arches sort of create this gesture of invitation to the courtyard. We created a barrel vault, a sort of cross vault in the foyers with mirrors at each end to create an illusion of infinite space. And then these are renders of the interior courtyard, and then the typical flats, which always have 2.6 meter high ceilings. In the top floors, they have 3 meter high ceilings. So always trying to aim for that sense of generosity. French doors are also a kind of go-to window type for me. And here is the building being made in a factory in Sheffield. So the whole project was designed as prefabricated: columns, beams, slabs, cores, facades, everything. And CNC cut forms, bricks cut in half, laid on the forms, concrete poured onto that, and tilted up for the pointing. So this is really, I think, the future in terms of construction. Can see it's a very tiny site. There's nowhere to put anything, but it's also practically zero waste. Building sites are one of the worst offenders in terms of generating waste. And so prefabrication eliminates like 80% of construction waste. So this is a key to a more sustainable future, also speeds up construction significantly. And it's much safer, you don't have scaffolding, and you can have really excellent quality control because all of the pointing is done, everything's assembled in a factory in controlled environments. So here on the left, again, is our competition render, and on the right, the completed building. So we've managed to stick quite close to our original scheme, which is always our ambition. And then as you move around the building, it's still under construction a little bit here, but you can see the kind of similarity, and in a way passing through all the tests that housing has to go through in terms of efficiency and daylight and envelope. It's not an easy sector to work in, but there are opportunities when you are really efficient with the planning to inject little moments of joy, like my tribute to Paris with this sort of continuous cornice balcony at the first floor level and little corner protectors. And here is the completed actual foyer. And then on the right, the staircase up to the bicycle store. So it's in the courtyard, and we just wanted to make something really lovely out of a very functional piece of sort of infrastructure in the building. So here's the finished building that acts as a kind of sentinel at the top of the park, a friendly sentinel that has really sort of enriched the way people see the neighborhood and created this new connection between its past, like St. Pancras Station, its kind of railway heritage, and the future. So I've got 3 more minutes. So another thing on the board is an entrance building for a Cambridge college. This is for Homerton College in Cambridge, and it's a tiny project, but an important one because it's about bringing new identity and a sense of welcome to the college. And this project is going to be hopefully net zero carbon. It's a kind of lantern and a veranda come together to create a sense of welcome and invitation, very rational organization based on the most efficient span of a timber frame. So a structural frame, optimized veranda, stacking the program, a copper clad like a lantern, and then connecting to the existing library. So it's a very efficient plan. And hopefully we'll kind of celebrate timber construction, but the design has been all run through parametric software to optimize spans and thicknesses of timber. So it's hopefully going to be a kind of demonstration project of how to build sustainably. And also just with the very flexible spaces that you get with post and beam construction. So that's our little lantern project. And sorry, there's some mixed up slides here. There is another project, which is a competition, but I think I have to stop because otherwise I'll run over the time.
If you want to quickly introduce it, I think we're all captivated. I would love to see.
Really? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so this is a competition that I was shortlisted, came second, for the London School of Economics Global Hub and Institute for Africa. And so London School, and I think it's important to talk about it because it's design research. Like we all know, you do a competition not just to win, but to develop your ideas and expand your broaden your thinking. And London School of Economics is embedded in London, in near the Thames, you can see on the left, and opposite Lincoln's Inn Fields. And this was the project site here. Sort of an existing 1950s building full of asbestos, really low ceilings, terrible column grid, and very unloved. And our scheme is really was attempting to express both a kind of new narrative that included my co-designers who were from Lagos, Nigeria, Studio Contra, and ABA working together to produce a new institutional language that brought in sort of African vernacular materials and forms of expression with a kind of Western urban tradition. So here I am with Studio Contra, Ola and Jeffrey, and we work together to both respond to the site in terms of urban organization, creating a place that's part of the campus, that's also kind of public realm that allows the public to flow through the site, and creates a memorable meeting place, because one of the really important things in the project was making an agora for the public to participate in debates and discussions being held in the building. Very strict planning envelope on the left, absolutely couldn't protrude 1 millimeter past this kind of constrained envelope. And so we developed a kind of stepped form with sort of C-shaped with an internal courtyard, because another requirement of the brief was to not have any academic office without an openable window. So the whole building had to have access to natural light and fresh air. So quite tricky, 69,000 square meters. So it was really tough packing all the program onto the site. So we thought about bringing together kind of archetypal forms of gathering of settlements in Africa, the kind of traditional homesteads, a circle as a kind of universal form of gathering, to be the main gesture in terms of the agora on the ground floor of the building. So this was how it comes together. So we reused the existing building structure on the bottom 3 floors, inserted a new kind of bracing structure, which is the agora, and then academic offices above, and then communal spaces and restaurant on the top floor. And the idea of the agora was to make it both permeable and visible from the street, open to the public potentially, and then it can be closed with acoustic doors and curtains to become a sort of isolated space. And this is the structure, this kind of radiant structure with an oculus at the center for natural ventilation, and this kind of flexible periphery to allow it to be used in different ways, and also those curved tracks were curtain tracks for acoustic to divide it into 3 spaces. So yeah, in essence, it was really about bringing for the first time an expression of sort of African culture and African or more global, non-Western idea of form and articulation to the facade. So each of those terracotta flutes is a chimney, a little bit like wind catchers in the Middle East. So they're part of a ventilation system, and also an articulation that relates to the fluted columns on the neighboring neoclassical buildings. And then the sort of terracotta material is both traditional to the UK, but also traditional in Africa and the global South. So it was really trying to find a new language and to present that language in one of London's most prominent civic spaces. So this is it, ideals, memory, context, and instinct coming together to create a sense of identity, community, and belonging. And that's the end of my talk. And please don't forget, we've recently published a monograph, so please order one from TC Cuadernos. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alison. That was such a visually rich presentation, in addition to the knowledge that you've shared. And yeah, thank you. I feel so inspired. I think that it's really lovely to see the strength of all of the softness that you bring to the architecture, if that makes sense. I think that I was struck by that in all of the images. Everything was both soft and strong. And I think that sometimes we don't think of those two adjectives together, but it's really important. Also just light-filled. I love that philosophy. So thank you so, so much. Yeah, and we have a lot of questions, so I'm going to dive in. Before I do, just a reminder to everyone that we have a poll up in the polls tab that's right below the chat. So if anyone's interested in following in Alison Brooks' footsteps and entering the A+ awards, you can fill out that poll and join the mailing list. We also have a book out, and we'll be sharing the link with you again, or the discount code with you again, in the emails following this talk. So perfect. Welcome back, Alison. And I'll just dive into some of the questions then. I'm going to try to go in order of some of the projects you discussed. So when you were discussing the Exeter project in Oxford, we had Joseph asking a bit more about the material selection on the roof. We don't have to go back for all of them, but I think it might be nice to go back to that slide if we can. There we go.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, well, the roof is stainless steel shingles, and the shingles have been stippled and bead blasted. They're the same material that you get in elevators. You know, the sort of nibbly stainless steel that you get. It's sort of anti-scratch. It's hardened through bead blasting and stippling. And it's also oxidized. So some of the sheets were dipped in a kind of chemical mix that changed refraction in the surface layer of the stainless steel. So some of them are sort of gray and the others are silvery. And because with copper, the roof would eventually turn green and yeah, and with aluminium, the metal would eventually sort of oxidize and go milky. And so stainless steel was seen as a way of just having a global, and yeah, it sort of illuminates, it softly illuminates its context.
Yeah, it's interesting to me. Somehow I think that it visually, even though it's a completely different material, can recall like some older slate roofs that I've seen before, which is what I thought when I saw it, like a modern kind of visually similar. That's really interesting to know about the process. We have a lot of material questions for you. I think that speaks to the beauty of the materials that you use and the way that you use them. So we have someone else asking if you ever use wood veneers while designing interiors. And that was in relation to this project.
Yes. I mean, everything in this building that's not solid cherry is cherry veneer. And that's also what's behind me here in my own house. It's all cherry veneer. And this comes from my youth. My mother used to sort of collect early North American antiques, and she especially loved the ones that were made of cherry. And there is something amazing about cherry wood, the very tight grain. It's sort of silky and really smooth and has a lot of character and a beautiful grain. So I just always work with cherry. Like, that's it. Yeah, this is cherry as well, solid cherry doors, but the floor is actually jatoba, which is Brazilian cherry, because cherry is a little bit soft for flooring in public spaces.
Yeah, when you pulled this slide up, I think my jaw dropped when I saw the floor and I saw other people in the comments commenting on it. Yeah, and I love that personal connection with the wood. Someone else on the topic of wood is asking if you could give us a little bit of the story behind the glulam timber arches for the cloisters, where they were fabricated and where they were transported from.
Okay, sure. Yeah, they were fabricated in the Netherlands. So the timber is spruce, which is, not the greatest material. I mean, it's quite soft and, it's really economical. That's why it's made into glulam. And so it's probably Austrian spruce, but it was fabricated in the Netherlands and shipped from the Netherlands. We actually did have to work to the places where we had to economize.
I lost you for a tiny bit of that, but I think that I got a lot of it. There we go. So if anyone has any final questions for Alison, just while she's going to check in on her internet, we just have 5 minutes left. I have a few more saved, but you can just navigate over to the questions tab, which is directly below the chat. And that's where I'm grabbing the questions from for anyone who's not. So if you just look right below where you were typing. There we go. Welcome back. So for that, I actually have a question. I first want to just congratulate you and your firm on winning the Best Medium Firm Award at our A+ Awards this year. It was very well deserved, and we'd like to ask just what it means to you to win and what an A+ award means to you.
Well, it's really fantastic to win. I'm really grateful for that recognition. I think, it's important because I get the sense that Architizer is American in sort of origin, but it's also global. And it's just great to be recognized by a kind of publication, or sort of to be acknowledged by another community other than the UK community. It's there's such a huge array of really great architects working around the world and in the US, and to be part of that community is really an honor. Yeah. It seems we sometimes feel in the UK, buildings are so much smaller and budgets are so much tighter, and it's really hard to compete with what's going on in the rest of the world. So it's really great to have, in a way, the effort we put into doing something, to just putting quality into our work. I really appreciate it.
That's so lovely to hear. And I think that your talk today encapsulates also what we love about Architizer and our community, and why we celebrate firms like yours is sharing this type of knowledge with the global community. And you're drawing on references from outside of the UK also and bringing them into your work and collaborating with architects from outside of the UK. And then you're also sharing your philosophies with everyone who's watching from around the world. So thank you. And thanks to everyone who's tuning in.
So you're very welcome, and thank you.
Thanks. We just have a couple more minutes, so I'm going to jump to another building. We're going to go to the St. Pancras residential project, and we have Aaron asking whether or not you had to end up changing any of the arch shapes when you went into the construction documents for buildability as you were planning that. The images for the process of that one were absolutely striking, like the inspirations that you brought in and the development that you presented. And this person also says, thank you for presenting. I love your work.
Thank you. Well, I think the design of the arches, the width in residential construction on quite a complex site, it's a sort of pentagon shaped site. It's very hard to have a regular column grid. In residential architecture, the column grid is generally not regular because it's, you know, the 4-meter wide living room and the 3-meter wide bedroom, and, you know, everything is optimized. And so we just took that irregular grid, you know, right down to the ground. And so the arches respond to the width of the grid, but it isn't automatic. Like, not every wide grid is tall and not every narrow grid is small in terms of the arches. We kind of mixed it up in a very playful way. And this was really to kind of bring a kind of personality and animist idea to the building. They sort of look like legs, like, like the building is going to sort of walk away down the park or something like that. And really, these kind of idiosyncrasies, you're kind of allowed to do them when you're working in a language which is in itself a kind of, well, like much of what we do in architecture, it's not 100% honest, it's not 100% functional. There is a kind of picturesque quality to the way that we've positioned the arches and composed them. It's compositional and experiential, and it's more dynamic. You know, I'm trying to make our buildings feel like they're in motion.
Alison, I think that we might have lost you.
That they're not static objects, that they are actually a being. You know, they're kind of okay. Yeah, that's fine. Hang on.
Oh, here we go. I'm gonna wrap it up, and hopefully Alison will pop back in to say goodbye. But I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate everyone who tuned in, and thank you especially to Alison. I'll just wait till she puts her headphones back in. Please feel free to tune in 1 hour's time. We're going to have Mekanu joining us, and then after that, we'll be discussing contemporary tropical architecture with Salanyak Arquitectos from Costa Rica. So we'll see you all later in the next hour. I'm just thank Alison.
Sorry about this.
That's okay. The UK rain really lives up to its stereotype. I just wanted to say thank you so much for your time and for bringing us this beautiful, inspiring, thought-provoking presentation. I'm definitely going to go back and be looking at these images after we wrap up. So thank you.
Well, you're very welcome. It was a pleasure, and apologies for the lack of Wi-Fi.
That's okay. Well, I'll be sure to check out your book as well. And thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day wherever you are, and see you later.
Bye-bye.